one of the things that my friend Keenan, who I'd mentioned before, the director, co-writer, co-producer of Mix Out, says when he's on set and he's giving the rallying speech to the troops, the production team and all the actors and everything. One of the last things he says before we all go off to our various jobs, he says, "Hey guys, be kind to one another." And I know that gets thrown around a lot, but really, I think it comes down to loving one another and being kind to one another.
Disinformation is spreading.
There will be a surprise outbreak. Is the issue of pandemic.
No social distancing at all.
They said that they would express their concerns about the mask supply.
Where's the mask? Where's the glove?
A second wave is
we all need some good news.
This is a message for all the healthcare workers out there.
Thank you.
If you're looking for hope tonight, raise your hand. If you feel alone and don't understand, if you're fighting the fight of your life, then stand.
From Santa Rosa, California, this is 19 Stories. I'm Cheryl Halling. My guest today is actor, screenwriter, and producer Joe Coffey, who originally hails from Boston, Massachusetts, and grew up in the Irish neighborhood of West Roxbury, otherwise known as Westie, in a family with deep Irish and Sicilian roots. Joe began acting at the age of 15 in theater and musical theater throughout Massachusetts. After graduating from the prestigious Boston Latin High School, attending Stonehill College for theater, apprenticing at Williamstown Theater Festival under artistic director and highly acclaimed actor Roger Rees, Joe then studied at the Eugene O'Neill Theater in Waterford, Connecticut, as part of the ensemble of the National Theater Institute. He continued his training on a scholarship at the University of Florida, from which he graduated with an MFA in 2009. For the past 12 years, Joe has been on a steady rise in stage, film, and television. One of his most successful television roles is as Horace Dodge in the highly successful The Legend of Dodge campaigns that he co-starred in for 5 years with Tyler Bryan as his brother John Dodge. Joe is in 4 films that are currently in post-production, with one of them being a film that he co-wrote and produced with the director Keenan O'Reilly, Mix Out, about a Boston ICE agent who is forced to choose between the law and his community. Joe Coffey is speaking to me from Los Angeles, California, where he currently resides, and I'd like to welcome him to 19 Stories.
Hi, Cheryl. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, hello, Joe. You are very welcome. I'm so delighted that you are joining me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I made some of my favorite beverage, coffee, pun intended.
Of course. Coffee with coffee.
It is also Dunkin', as stereotypical as that probably may seem.
I'm just really happy that we're finally able to align the planets for us to have this chat and to have you join me, Joe. Thank you so much. Given your trade is telling other people's stories, and you're on a podcast about sharing people's stories, let's jump right in and talk about your early beginnings in theater and how at the age of 15, your parents wanted you to be, quote, a stronger public speaker. And I'm curious, were you a shy kid and this was their way of helping you build up your confidence in public?
So my parents are both in the law profession. They are politically active in Boston, and that was something that they wanted to see me thrive in at a young age. They had given me an incredible framework in terms of my values and principles, and they always instilled in me, if you show up early, then you're on time. If you show up on time, you're late. And if you show up late, then you don't care. And the public speaking aspect of that was because they saw it as something that would give me a set of skills that were something that I could transition into other professions with. And so that was really important to them.
So did they enroll you in an acting class and you realize, I'm not interested really to go into law or politics, but you felt early on that this was your calling? Yeah,
honestly, it started with doing the speeches on stage in front of an audience. And it was one thing to do them in front of them at home, practicing, but getting in front of a live audience, all of a sudden it's just you alone up there and you either deliver or you don't. And so as nerve-wracking as that was, there was an exciting and appealing part of it too, because it just forced me to be there in the moment and taught me to, rely on what I had prepared, but also what I was receiving from the audience. So there was a back and forth, whether it was sighs or laughter or just absolute stillness and quietness in the auditorium that you could hear a pin drop. All of that is an ebb and flow, a give and take that you're getting from a group of people. And that was really exhilarating for me, being up there. And from that, doing the political speeches and that kind of thing, I transitioned into, I actually asked some of the teachers, is it okay if I do scenes from novels? So some of the novels we were reading in class at the time were the ones that we all grew up with, right? Like Les Miserables, Tale of Two Cities, Great Expectations. And they said, no one's ever asked that before, but I guess we'd be open to it. It depends on how you bring it to the table. So I remember I did this one scene from Les Miserables, and it was the scene where old Father Fauchelevent is crushed underneath a cart, and it's very muddy, and he just keeps sinking and sinking and sinking in the mud, and none of the townspeople want to go underneath the cart and lift it because they're afraid. Mm-hmm. Rightfully so. And there are two people watching this all unfold. One is Jean Valjean, and his identity hasn't been revealed at that point in the story. And then the other one is Inspector Javert. And Inspector Javert is suspicious of Jean Valjean at this point. He's this very burly man. He's very strong. He seems to be a man that has a lot of courage. And Inspector Javert basically calls his bluff and says, I only know one man who'd be able to lift that cart and save that old man, and he was a convict at the galleys of Toulon. So Jean Valjean is met with this decision, and we all face this kind of decision at some point in our lives. Do we save our own necks, or do we put our lives on the line? Do we put our identity or whatever it is that's important to you on the line to save someone else, or to stand up for to stand up for someone else? Rosa Parks, on the bus, whatever it is. And so that was just a fascinating thing for me, because I got to take on all these different characters. Really just a fascinating thing for a high school kid to get up and do. It was just so much fun for me. And it's funny, those kinds of stories at the time, I just kind of, was like, oh yeah, this is cool because there's all these different characters. But I didn't really fully grasp the metaphors and the themes behind all of it. So looking back and rereading Les Miserables, I just appreciate it so much more. I can articulate all these things now, but at the time in high school, it's just oh, cool. It's all these different characters.
Well, what a mature piece to present. And what's interesting is the way you framed public speaking. Never really thought about it in the way, I have at times, because most people's fear is public speaking. They'd rather jump out of a window than get up and speak in front of even, two people, because you are being very vulnerable and putting yourself out there. But it really is kind of like a one woman or one man show every time you do. You are improvising if you're paying attention to the audience, like you say, the give and take. It was a really interesting point to put on that. And again, a very mature piece for a high school student to take on. So would you consider that your first acting role, if you will, or do you remember your first full-blown character that you did?
I would say that's when I fell in love with the craft. And, I did little plays here and there. I think we all were forced to do them at some point, dressed as a tree or dressed as a flower or whatever the heck.
Yes.
But growing up as a kid, I never really had an interest in theater. It wasn't quote unquote cool. I grew up playing ice hockey and hung out with most of the hockey guys. So it wasn't until high school that started to change. And yeah, I just caught the bug. After that was junior year of high school. I remember I did Les Miserables. And then after that, I did Casey at the Bat, which is, I'm sure most people listening know of it, but it's a American baseball poem, a classic about Casey, who is the hero of Mudville. And everybody expects him to just bash it out of the park. And his pride gets the best of him.
And the rest is history, so to speak. In your intro, I mentioned some of the people you've apprenticed or studied with And given their successes, I imagine they afforded you insights into the business and craft of acting that others wouldn't necessarily be exposed to. So I'd love if you could share what it meant for you to have that kind of guidance while honing your acting chops in theater versus getting your start in television or film. Because, given you live in LA right now, what does that mean for you to have that exposure, especially since you mentioned, you grew up around playing hockey and kind of that, I imagine that tough, maybe cocky Boston dude, and then, you're going into the theater and then you pursue a Master of Fine Arts. So I'd love to know what kind of influence that, obviously a positive one, but what that meant for you at that time in your life.
Well, I have my parents to thank an incredible amount because they've always been supportive of me. At first, I think there was a little hesitation just because my interest in theater was so new and very different from ice hockey, of course. But they have always supported me and encouraged me once they saw just how much I loved it and how serious I was about wanting to become a better actor.
It sounds like they had probably as much, if not more, to do with giving you the base as the human that you are pursuing acting.
Yeah, they've had an incredible role in that. Absolutely. And I think that it's a profession that I honestly never thought I would step into. And even today, I have doubts, and maybe this is just the life of an artist, but constant doubts of, am I good enough, quote unquote, or am I a fraud? And is someone going to finally pull the veil and see that this guy is just an absolute clown and doesn't know what he's doing? So I think, to answer your question, not to sound too woo-woo here, but my journey in high school and college and just trying to figure out who I was as a man interacted with my love for acting, because you learn so much about human behavior and the human condition in the work that it forces yourself to really examine who you are. So this was a complete upside down point of view from the identity that I thought I had, in my community as a hockey player. Because my plan, if I had it my way, was just going to play high school hockey. And I was great at hockey. It wasn't just a hobby. It was something that I definitely want to play into college and then hopefully in the minors and then get looked at by scouts in the NHL. That was the dream all my life. So for acting to all of a sudden step in and take up so much more of my time was definitely a dismantling of my identity as a person. Kind of going all over the place here, but all that to say, it's still a continuous journey of trying to figure out who I am and how I can better serve people in this craft. Hockey was a very self-absorbed career, and I feel like this one has opened me up to being a part of other people's lives in a way that I never thought I would.
I gotta say, I'm going to jump ahead to something I plan on asking you later on. But you touched on it with being vulnerable and sharing about feeling like a fraud at times and, somebody's going to figure this out, which kind of literally made me gasp because your breadth as an actor, Joe, is that of someone, and I'm not blowing smoke here. I don't need to. I've known you before we've sat down to chat right now. Your breadth of an actor is that of someone who's destined to have a lifelong career. And that will go on, I have no doubt, to win an Academy Award. And I don't believe for a moment that's your goal. But if someone were to watch your reels on, say, Actors Access, of which you also have some of your hockey sprints and workout on there, it's clear that you definitely have, as they say, the it factor. And I've mentioned that to you before. You've played some really diverse characters, and I'd love to talk about some of those roles. But I want to say that I really appreciate you saying what you did, because it's easy to think when someone is experiencing great success or appears to have the golden touch that they never go through doubt or challenging times. And again, I was going to ask you this later on, but because you touched upon it, in those times of doubt or fear that someone's going to figure you out, is it your faith or a particular set of skills that pulls you through it?
Yeah, my faith in God absolutely is at the core of, it's my ballast, so to speak. I also have a group of friends here in Los Angeles that I trust and I know I can go to for encouragement, for words of advice, for prayer. Those things are very important to me. And honestly, I don't know how people who live in LA do it without God or without having a tribe of people for support. This is a very difficult industry, as we all know, or any artist, any form of art is. And if you don't have a support team, then I don't know how people can do it on their own. And that's been difficult for me because I didn't realize it until a few years here in LA, because I did come in with a bit of an ego and I had to be humbled pretty quickly for me to understand how that ego was going to get in the way. And it was an ugly thing.
I'd love to ask you about that because you talked about how studying acting is really a discovery about yourself and people. So it seems like it's almost counterintuitive or a juxtaposition to have an ego if you're on a quest to learn about self. So where do you think that ego came from?
I believe the ego came from thinking that all of the success I was having on the East Coast was because of me, was because I worked really hard for it and was able to achieve it on my own. Of course, there were people in my life that I had worked with and we had supported each other, but it was I feel like it could have gone deeper and my appreciation for them should have gone deeper. And it wasn't until I fell on my face numerous times in LA that I realized I needed to be more vulnerable and admit that I didn't have everything figured out. And I needed to find a team of people that I meshed with and wanted to create the same kind of stories and work. And I think that's important. And it's something that I didn't before.
So that's interesting because maybe that's what gave you pause when I mentioned some of the people that you were a protege to or studied under and apprenticed with. Because when I read some of these names, I go, this is really impressive. This is the stuff that people dream of having these experiences. And, to allow us grace, though, at the times that we do have something that's that rich and so wonderful, sometimes we don't understand and appreciate it until we've had a chance to step outside of it and be out of that protective bubble, if you will. Mm-hmm. And realize what a blessing that experience was. And prior to delving into your recent work, I want to ask you, going back to your time at the University of Florida, I want to ask you about the character you picked for your Master of Fine Arts thesis. And that is the role of Shelley Levine in David Mamet's Glengarry Glen Ross, especially since this year marks the 30th anniversary of the film's release. The play goes back to 1984, but the film was released in 1992. And given that you were, 28, 29, can you tell me, first of all, I'd love to hear the premise of the play for those who don't know. What drew you to that story and that character in particular? And especially since you were at the beginning of a burgeoning career and Shelley Levine, the character Shelley Levine, played by Jack Lemmon in the film, is tragically at the end of his career.
Yeah. I had a professor at the time, and that was 2009. It was my last year in grad school. It was a 3-year program, so I started in 2006. His name was Tim Altmeyer, and he is one of those professors who is willing to go deeper. He was able to call me out on my pride and ego in class in a gentle way, but that made me start reevaluating the craft and my approach to it. And also, it's made me start questioning a lot of how I carried myself and how I presented myself to people and treated people. So Tim was a mentor to me. He still is in a way. It's difficult. We live in 2 different coasts. We've lost touch in some ways, but we check in once in a while with each other. But he was also a therapist, and looking back at it, because his classes involved so much character analysis. It did feel like therapy. So when he approached me and said, hey, we're doing Glengarry Glen Ross. Here are 2 roles that I think you would be right for. read the script, let me know what you think, and tell me which one, sounds more interesting to you. Now, I went and read it, and of the two roles, Shelley Levine's just had more layers, and it was a lot more challenging. The other role is a businessman named Moss, who his last name is Moss. I forget his first name, but it's played by Ed Harris in the film. And fascinating character, but I knew that I could absolutely crush that role. I connected more with Moss. Shelley Levine's character scared me. So I knew that, especially given it was in my third year, it was my thesis role, I would have to do a ton of research and really delve in with this character. I wanted to challenge myself, and Tim agreed. He said, I knew you'd pick that one. So Mamet is an absolutely fantastic writer, and I've read I've read other books of his about scene study and character analysis, and he's just a fascinating man to me. So that whole experience with Tim at the helm was incredible, and Tim was able to direct me and mentor to me and just unveil this entirely new approach to the work that was very grounded, was very present. He said a lot of times that this was really just about having a conversation with somebody else on stage. What is it that you want from the other person? Don't worry about, I have to hit this beat or I have to remember this emotion at this time. Just be in it and make it about the other person and what it is you're trying to get from them. And we would do a basic blocking, but we had so much freedom as actors, and he allowed for that. So he was one of those first people in my life that really was willing to take the time. And he had so many students. I mean, he didn't have to spend all this time with me, but he cared about each and every one of them, and probably suffered a lot of sleepless nights because of how much he poured into his students. And for that, I'll be forever grateful to him. And I'd take a 2x4 to the head for that man.
Again, I think it's, first of all, very generous on his part to give you that much freedom, because, certain university professors can have their own ego and believe that they're imparting this all-powerful Oz wisdom upon their students, which they are if they're good and they're worth their weight in gold. But what a generous man to give you the liberty to make choices like that, and also to give you the freedom to explore and to pour into you like that. That's what a true teacher and true mentor is. And so what a blessing to have that, because then it in turn made you the actor and part of the man that you are, and a blessing to us. And, I was watching your commercial reel recently, and I realized I didn't know this until I saw it, and I went, oh my gosh, he's the nerdy unibrow guy in the AM/PM spot. Joe, in all the time I've known you, I didn't know that. And yet you went on to portray Horace Dodge, the debonair innovator and co-founder of Dodge Motor Company, in the very successful Dodge Brothers campaign. And each spot is just so beautifully shot. It's more like a short feature film in their production value. So I'm curious how that came about for you, as you were not only hired for the commercials, but traveled the country as Horace Dodge with your brother John Dodge, attending automotive events as well.
Yeah, that was incredible, and something that we didn't know would last so long. Back in 2014, I got a phone call from my agent saying that I was to go in for this audition for Dodge, not knowing much about it, just that I was supposed to dress in period piece clothing from the 1920s. So I went in there, and it's a bunch of guys. We're all around the same age. And they give us the description and the breakdown and everything. So I see it's about these two brothers, and they both happen to be redheads. And they're born in Niles, Michigan, in rural part of Michigan. And it's about how they founded the Dodge Motor Company, but first started working with Henry Ford. And the campaign premise was that, like you said, they were the innovators of that time, broke away from Ford and did their own thing. So they were the automotive pioneers, so to speak. And the audition process took about 2 weeks. They had us all line up. The first audition was just introducing ourselves and, saying a few lines or something. And for whatever reason, I decided to have a toothpick in my mouth, and it kind of gave me a little bit of a swagger. So they happened to like that, and I got called back. And, the field was basically getting narrowed down over the 2 weeks. And little did we know that they were also auditioning in San Francisco, Chicago, and New York. So they were really going above and beyond trying to find the right two guys for this campaign. So again, they were looking for two redheads. So it was pretty funny when they narrowed it down to like 30 people, and we all looks like we could be brothers. It was like a tribe of Irish people, like in the audition room. And we were told to go in, and it was a barroom setting, and we were supposed to get up on a table and give an improvised speech to the town saying, that we were the Dodge brothers, John and Horace. You don't know about us right now, but one day you're going to know about us and our cars and how famous we're going to be, etc. So I went up and did that. And of course, it harkened back to my high school days when I had to do public speaking all the time. And so I felt confident about that, got called back. And then this time around, we had to pretend like we were driving. And, it's two brothers. So when I'm thinking about it, I don't have brothers, but I have sisters. And I have best friends back home, guys who I would always horse around with, doing donuts in a parking lot or whatever. And I'm driving and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I just remember thinking, I got to do something that's going to make me stand out. So I don't know how I just thought of this in the moment, but kind of a crazy thing in retrospect. And it was definitely a hit or miss type of thing. I'm driving and, I'm barking at my brother next to me who's driving in the opposite car. And again, we're in an audition room. So it's just a chair and like a piece of wood and with like a wheel. And I get up on my seat and my brother's like, "What are you doing, Horace?" And I'm just like, "Just you wait, John." And I pull down my pants and I put my butt out the window and I go, how about a full moon? And, and I remember the director goes, cut. And everybody in the room like just starts laughing out loud and like they're all turning bright red. But the director is not showing any emotion. He just has his arms folded. And I'm just like, oh crap, this is it. He's going to kick me out. I went too far. He didn't like that choice. And I remember he turns to me and everybody, you could hear a pin drop in the room. Cause at this point they're like, oh my gosh, what's he going to say?
He's so out of here.
Oh yeah, totally. And he goes, I woke up this morning and I never expected to see your white Irish ass in this audition room. I said, okay. And then he said, get out. I said, okay. So we both left and I went home and, I was just like, well, whatever. I left everything in the room. It was a choice.
Literally. Yeah.
Yeah. They either like me or they don't. So I tried to put it out of my head. Easier said than done, right? I remember the next morning I get a phone call from my agent and I'm just expecting it's about another audition for a different company or something. And he goes, what did you do? I said, what do you mean? He says, what did you do in that room? And I said, well, and I just kind of gave him the play-by-play. And my agent just like scoffed and he was like, well, you were memorable. You're booked.
And did you freak? Did you just freak?
Well, I knew how big the campaign was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, those three spots. Little did we know that Dodge would really like them and that this would continue for 5 years. So in the end, we shot close to 20 different spots as the Dodge brothers.
You know what I love so much about that story, Joe? And first of all, you touched on this, is a lot of people don't realize, outside of the business, when you have a campaign like that, how much casting actually happens. It would probably blow your mind to know that it started out maybe with a couple of thousand, down to a couple of hundred, down to, like you say, 30 in just your room where you're at. And it's safe to say, I digress for a moment, that you are ginger-haired. People think that, oh, you're Irish. Of course you have red hair. No, but you are a ginger-haired man. But you have all this casting that's happening around the country. And the fact that you took the chance that you did, because I've heard it said numerous times and more so lately in voiceover that, safe, no pun intended, buys you a cup of coffee, but not much else. I mean, safe doesn't get you hired. You have to do, like you said, the thing that stands out. And I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall, but the fact that you got that response and you're thinking, that's it. Okay, I just put it all out there. I'm going home and on to the next one. And then you nailed it, and not just nailed the couple of spots, but 5 years later. So what a wonderful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. Stupidity and denial are deadly poisons we need to get away from. That line from your lead character, Jason, from The Art of Survival, a short film that got a lot of film festival acclaim that you starred in, is a far cry from Unibrow Boy or Horace Dodge. And I'd love for you, first of all, to tell us about the premise of the film and where you go, Joe, to play a character like that, because Jason is one of many characters you play that I wouldn't want to meet on a well-lit, busy street in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
Let alone, forget the dark alley. You can play it. You can play it. Where do you go to do that, Joe?
Oh, man. Again, going back to one's personal journey as an artist and just trying to figure out, who Joe is or who you are or whoever is as a human being meshed with the work, I think is the best way I can explain it. A lot of times roles will come into my life at a time where I'm already conflicted or going through something emotional. So I step into the role and just subconsciously a lot of that gets unearthed. So with Jason, he is a very controlling cop by day, doomsday prepper privately. And he thinks that what he's doing is the right thing in wanting to protect his home, wanting to protect his wife from anything external that could harm them. Unfortunately, that takes him down this rabbit hole where he goes to the extreme and his wife is in a very unhealthy relationship in which she needs to get away from. So I pull from people that I've met in my past life, situations that I've been in, where I happen to be in my headspace in that given moment. And I do it in a safe way, but it's something that I'm done with acting. If it's not real, the camera can tell it's not real. It has to be real.
Yeah.
So I think earlier in my career, it was like, oh, I'm stepping into this character. There is no character. That's you. Now, that might sound crazy, but it's true. It's you in those given situations. And if it feels like you're acting, then you are.
Yeah.
I had a friend, a girl I used to date. Her name's Jetta Sondergaard. And she would always make fun of me because I can never pronounce her name correctly.
Apparently.
But she is this Danish actress and she's phenomenal. And that's something that she used to say to me was that if it feels like you're acting, then you are. And another thing that she used to say to me, and I'm looking at my wall right now because I wrote this down, feel everything on the inside, do nothing on the outside. So all that to say, the more that I'm willing to surrender to the given circumstances, trust the person across from me or next to me, the other actor, and not second guess the choices that I'm making in the moment and truly just listen, that's some of the best acting that I can offer. And that's some of the best acting advice I can offer other people. But again, like our own insecurities, our own fears, they get in the way. But you look at someone like Joaquin Phoenix in The Master. I don't know if you've seen that film, Cheryl. Or Timothée Chalamet in Beautiful Boy.
Yes.
Yeah, he said this before. When an actor doesn't know what they're doing, that's when it's the most organic. And it's fascinating to watch. But when you, and I'm quoting him here, when you see the wheels turning and the mechanics, an audience member, it's not as enjoyable. There's something, and you know the difference subconsciously, even if you can't articulate it as an audience member, So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's...
Yeah, you said it. It did. You did answer it. If you wanted to speak more to that, I certainly don't want to cut you off. I wanted to just clarify because I believe I know what you meant by this. And first of all, just in regards to seeing the wheels turning, there are certain actors, their craft and how they do it is how they do it. But I see it all the time. I see the wheels and I'm like, that's them. That's how they fashion their career, their take. But feel everything on the inside and show nothing on the outside. Just to clarify that, I hear you in meaning you feel the rage, you feel the control, you feel the violence, you feel whatever, it could even be joy, but you don't necessarily express that physically on your fellow actor or actors. Is that what you meant by that statement?
Yeah, I think you don't have to indicate or you don't have to push, particularly with film, because the camera's, for the most part, within inches of your face, is picking up everything. So where in the theater, and again, as artists, we've heard this thousands of times, but you are trying to reach an audience which just their eyesight is further away. So you just have to be conscious of that more. But I think that's what's so freeing about film work is you can really just be there in the moment and not have to worry about the camera. The camera's just going to pick up your truth. You don't have to worry about angles and point of view or, did the person in row 7 catch that? There's something so freeing about it.
With that in mind, because the theater is all about, like you say, reaching the person in the last row, being expressive, projecting physically, physically, audibly, etc. How did you then, was it through your training, through the direction you got, or just you organically adapted to that medium? Because it is very different. Like you say, the camera is right there. It's just like in voiceover, the mic is right there. So how did you tone it down, if you will, or bring yourself into the world of the camera versus the world of the theater?
A lot of times in theater, I would get feedback from my peers and professors that there's no camera in front of your face. I missed that. You need to project more. And over time, those things became frustrating to hear. And it was disheartening, particularly when they're barked at you, when you've got 2 nights before we open a show. It's like, I still can't hear you in the scene. You need to project more. And that didn't feel natural to me. So I think that was something that it was the beginnings of the pivot into cinema for me, because I didn't like having to, I don't know how to articulate this, but it felt at times like there was too much pushing for me on stage. And I think as actors, we need to figure out what our strengths are and where we click and maybe in other areas where we don't. And I love the theater, and I just happen to be having more success in cinema. So everybody's different.
Yeah, you found your medium. I understand that. You found your medium, and even within your medium, is it television? Is it film? Is it commercials? Is it documentary? I mean, there's so many layers, even within finding, okay, well, I found my medium, but then what's my niche within that? So there's nothing wrong with knowing that. In fact, it's so freeing that you do know that, because that's where you're blossoming right now. I mean, your IMDb, which I'll give that in the show notes, but your IMDb listings of all the amazing short films you've worked on and television shows and your success with Dodge. And, we just spoke of The Art of Survival, your film. And by the way, if you want to give a shout out to your co-star, I'm sorry I didn't mention her name.
Jessica Bell. Yeah, she's amazing. Absolutely. Very giving actress.
So shout out to Ring the Bell for Bell. Ring the bell for Jessica Bell. Again, speaking of The Art of Survival, I'm curious, given the pandemic, how the last 2 years have affected you creatively as an artist.
Now, that question excites me because the pandemic was a time that was very depressing for me, and I was at a low point in my life and started questioning a lot of things because the work dried up. But it forced me to step back into writing and start creating my own work with my friends, which is what I really love to do. Writing is just a different muscle. I don't love it as much as acting, but it is a muscle, an emotional muscle that I like to flex. And there's been this story churning about in my mind something that ties back to my childhood back in Boston. And I still don't know if I found the story, but a story, maybe just a splinter off of something that's to come, is something that Keenan O'Reilly and I, who is a close friend of mine, great director, writer, one of these up-and-comers, he just continues to grow in his confidence as a filmmaker, and I can't say enough about his talent and his heart as a human being. But he and I met out here and have collaborated on a few things now. So the two of us got together and wrote this splinter story, if you will, based in Boston. And it's about an ICE agent who is forced to choose between his community or the law. He's a guy who is very good at his job. He has a wife who's lovely, a little daughter. They're trying to move into a new house. A family man. He's beloved in the community. His best friend, this character's name is Sean Collins. His best friend is a guy named Jimmy Flynn. Jimmy is just getting out of rehab from cocaine use and other drugs. Still has a drinking problem, but he's trying to get his life on the right track. The two of them grew up together. They love each other. They'd go to battle for each other. So we're introduced to these two guys, and Sean has a pretty good life. And he goes door to door, most of them in the Latino community in Boston. And he is detaining, undocumented people, most of which have some kind of criminal record. And the flip at the end is that he has to go to the door of his best friend Jimmy's house and detain Jimmy's father, who's undocumented Irish. Can he do it? So he's faced with this moral decision, right? Follow the law or stay loyal to his community. Because detaining Jimmy's father means ultimate ostracization for him and his family from that community, from that very tight-knit Irish community. So that's a huge decision. Either that or you lose your job. You're not willing to go through with this. You lose your, very well-paying job and any chances of getting that nice new house, getting out of the crappy apartment that you live in and getting a nice new house for your wife. So there's a lot at stake here. And the entire process from pre-production to filming to now we're in post, we're almost done with post, a 17-minute film, but that was just a gift. And it was a joy to be a part of that entire thing. Ups and downs. I mean, some days we're pulling each other's hair out, but it all came together by God's grace. And we are very excited to, show the public and everyone involved with the film. Everybody's just so anxious to see it. So hopefully within the next month, we'll have a final cut sealed and ready to go.
And where will people be able to see it, the general public?
We're going to start in festivals. We already have a lead with a festival in Boston that's interested in premiering it there. And then we'll see what kind of traction we get in the other festivals, nationwide and worldwide. And then for people who want to see it, we'll send a private link. And then once it's out of festivals, we'll go from there. But we're also in the midst of writing the feature version of this, which, of course, we want to go back to the same area and shoot with many of the same people involved. So going back home and telling a story and getting to bring that to life was, a dream come true for me. And I can't say enough about the team we have involved. Again, I think it comes back to finding your tribe, find the people that you love and you want to create great work with, and stay loyal to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so easy in this past couple of years with everything. And I've got my hand raised over here about how emotions have allowed us to separate relationships that shouldn't have been separated, and then maybe some that should have were. But I'm curious, two things about your film. First of all, congratulations, Joe. I mean, I have no doubt it's going to be a feature film. I have no doubt, looking at your past successes, your current successes, that it's going to grow legs and do really well for you. But you mentioned it's a splinter story. So is this loosely based on an experience you had growing up in your neighborhood?
I think bits and pieces are. By the way, the title of the film, I probably should have said that, is called Mix Out, Micks.
What is that about, the title?
Yeah, so like if you were to call an Irish guy like a dirty Mick, that's like a very derogatory, thing to say.
Okay.
I guess if you, preface anything with dirty, it's like, oh, okay, you don't like me. But yeah, Mix Out, basically saying, Irish out. And then this goes back to, just to give a little bit of an explanation, it comes back to when the Irish first came to the United States, there were signs up in stores that said, Nina, no Irish need apply. And they were not welcomed with open arms. And in the north of Ireland, particularly during the Troubles, the big rallying cry was Brits out, Brits out. So just kind of touching upon, who we choose to welcome and who we choose to, not welcome to the United States has been an interesting thing to study over time. Yeah, I guess that's all I'm going to say.
Talk about timely. And as beautiful as humanity can be, we can also be pretty wretched to one another to actually have signs like that. But yeah, we've got that history in a lot of ways in our country. And like I say, there's a lot of beauty, but we've done some pretty wretched and continue around the world doing some pretty wretched things to one another. So emigrating and immigrating will always be an issue as we, navigate the time that we're in. And I'm so excited about your film. I mean, the fact that you produced and co-wrote and star in it and got to do this in your hometown, it's a pretty exciting thing for you. And I'd love to know, Joe, I mean, I have a sense in the person that I do know, and certainly talking about your faith, but in this particular time in life, what makes you hopeful?
I firmly believe that despite all the chaos going on in the world, despite the day-to-day extreme hardships, I feel like we've all been sucker punched in the eye.
Mm-hmm.
Despite death, despite war, despite those times when it's really hard to love your neighbor, God is in control and Jesus is on the throne. And look, no matter what you believe, I just firmly believe that there is a creator and he has his hand on all of this. So I guess I rest in that. I have peace in that. Now, is it a 24/7 peace? Absolutely not. I say that right now in this moment that I have peace. 5 minutes after this conversation ends with you, Cheryl, on this podcast, I will probably be freaking out and crying and, praying and throwing a hissy fit because I'm a big baby. But
well, thank you for waiting until after we're done. I appreciate that.
But what's great is that I have a Father in heaven who loves me, and he knows that I'm just a little kid, and he knows my wants and my desires, and he's taking care of me every day. And I firmly believe that. Now, it's hard to admit that. It's humbling because I want to be in control, right? Like
we all do. Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess that's just where faith comes in. And I don't have all the answers, but I'm learning as I'm going.
To that, I will say, first of all, amen. But with what you just shared, is there something you wish folks were mindful of right now as to how we can care for each other?
One of the things that my friend Keenan, who I'd mentioned before, the director, co-writer, co-producer of Mix Out, says when he's on set and he's giving the rallying speech to the troops, the production team and all the actors and everything. One of the last things he says before we all go off to our various jobs, he says, hey guys, be kind to one another. Mm-hmm. And I know that gets thrown around a lot, but really, I think it comes down to loving one another and being kind to one another. I live in an apartment complex, and when I first moved in, I didn't really want to get to know my neighbors. I have my life. I'm going to my job. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I was very self-absorbed, and I have this little studio, and, I just kind of wanted to be in my little cocoon. Well, the pandemic, interestingly enough, forces one to get to know one's neighbors pretty intimately, in the sense that everyone was working from home. So guess who I was bumping into more often than I normally would? My neighbors. Going to the laundry room, going to the mailbox, going down the street to get an extra thing of milk, the little convenience store, And so what was really nice is that we would start to drop little gifts off for each other at each other's doors.
Oh, I love that. Oh,
yeah.
That's beautiful.
I mean, that's unheard of in LA. It's like, what? Now everybody's out for themselves. And so sometimes I'd come home after a stressful day of XYZ, and there'd be, a little box of chocolates just from, one of my neighbors saying, hey, just hope you had a great day, thinking of you, like, just hang in there or whatever. And we were all kind of like each other's little encouragement team. And that was a beautiful thing. And now that the pandemic's over, those boxes of chocolates have ceased.
The chocolates are gone. I was going to say that. Oh, my God. Well, it brought out the best of humanity. And that's so cool because it could have gone the other way. It could have gotten really ugly, and yet it wasn't.
Yeah. No, definitely. And it forced me out of my box a bit. So for all the really low times during the pandemic, there were some, as you said, some really beautiful moments.
I think that is really lovely. And if we could carry that as a through line as we're re-engaging, that would even be more lovely. So I want to ask you, Mr. Joe Coffey, if there was a soundtrack to your life, what would be on it and why?
Ooh, I just got very emotional real quick. So we all know who Tracy Chapman is.
Mm-hmm.
And her song, Fast Car, for whatever reason, and I know when I hear the song and I'm in the moment with it, I know what the reasons are, but in a broader sense, for whatever reason, this song just hits home for me. It goes, you got a fast car. I want a ticket to anywhere. Maybe we make a deal. Maybe together we can get somewhere. Any place is better. See, I'm already starting to choke up. Starting from zero, got nothing to lose. Maybe we'll make something. Me, myself, I got nothing to prove. You got a fast car. I got a plan to get us out of here. I've been working at the convenience store, managed to save just a little bit of money. You won't have to drive too far. Just cross the border and into the city. You and I can both get jobs and finally see what it means to be living. See, my old man's got a problem. He lives with the bottle. That's the way it is. He says his body's too old for working. His body's too young to look like this. My mama went off and left him. She wanted more from life than he could give. I said, somebody's got to take care of him. So I quit school, and that's what I did. You got a fast car. Is it fast enough so we can fly away? We got to make a decision. Leave tonight or live and die this way. So I remember we were driving in your car. Speed so fast I felt like I was drunk. City lights lay out before us, and your arm felt nice wrapped around my shoulder. And I had a feeling that I belonged. I had a feeling I could be someone. So I think for most of my life, I've really just wanted to belong. I think that, like all of us, we want to be someone. And to answer your question, just this song resonates with me. And I would add this on the soundtrack of my life.
Thank you for that beautiful reading of it. That happens to be one of my favorite songs. And of hers in particular, because her guitar, the way she sings it, and the lyrics that you just, like I said, so beautifully and eloquently read are really strong. And that's how I felt many, many times of wanting to just get out of either a situation or wanting to be someone as well, Joe. And I think if I can encourage you, you are someone. You are someone with lots to offer. You have amazing talent. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. And I have to say, you're one of the few people in any business these days that does not have a website, and yet you consistently work. So it's obvious it's not adversely affecting you. And having said that, how do people get a hold of you?
I love Instagram. I love photos. I love to get to know people through their photos, and not only just photos of themselves, but photos of what kind of photos they take and why they chose to take those photos in that light at that angle. Instagram is a creative outlet, and I love being social on it. So you can find me on Instagram at Cup of Joe Coffey. And then also, if you want to email me and chat that way, my email is joecof@gmail.com.
Thank you, future Academy Award winner Joe Coffey. You heard it on 19 Stories from Fear to Hope. I'm going to mark this time in my calendar, and we're going to see where your trajectory takes you, because you are on, your star is rising, Joe. And I'm so happy we had this time to chat, and greatly looking forward to the release of Mix Out, and wish you nothing but continued success and health and happiness.
Well, thank you very much, Cheryl. You have a very crisp and lovely voice, and it was,
thank you.
Yeah, it was very soothing, and I felt like I wasn't able to articulate what was spinning in my head that well some of the times, but I really enjoyed the questions. They were not just generalized questions. They were very specific, and yeah, this was a pleasant time.
Thank you, Joe. You just have to come back a second time and revisit me, and we'll have coffee talk, literally and figuratively, as you're sitting down with your cup of black coffee. For our listeners who didn't know that he took a break in the midst of this to refill his coffee cup. And so I feel like I've had coffee talk with coffee. Yeah, we're going to do this again. Maybe we'll just do it like an installment, just check in with you every time one of your films come out and chat about that. It could happen. I don't know, a series simply entitled Coffee Talk. I don't know. It's an idea.
That's great.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Cheryl.
You're very welcome. You take care of yourself.
All right, you too.
You get a fast car.
I'd also like to thank the following news outlets for the use of their clips in so aptly painting the picture of the fear that we're facing during this pandemic. BBC, PBS, Now This, UNESCO, and Some Good News. I especially want to thank Joel and Luke Smallbone, otherwise known as the group for King and Country, for allowing me to use an excerpt of their song Together, which could not be a more hopeful and inspiring song for such a time as this. Finally, I'll leave you with the following from Proverbs 23:18. Surely there is a future, and your hope will not be cut off. Thank you again for joining me today. Feel free to offer feedback or a story idea at 19stories@soundsatchelstudios.com, via Instagram at Cheryl Halling VO. I look forward to sharing more stories on the next episode of 19 Stories from Fear to Hope. Until then, stay healthy and hopeful.
Together with our differences, together we are bolder, braver, stronger.